Hello, guys. It's been a while. I've noticed I've been dealing with a sickness and also dealing with a lot of things just happening in my life. But say I'm much better. And I wanted to talk about this. Yeah, Gashagwa recently said that. I think he said it today that the Kenyan government is actually hosting the Jubaland forces in Mandera and they actually occupy a large part of Mandera. And honestly, I'm not even shocked with this. If anything, this is to some extent, this is what the status quo of Kenya's foreign policy has been for a very long period of time. Now, the funny thing about Kenyans is that we actually don't know a lot about our foreign policy. Mostly because we never look at these things in terms of policies, we usually tie it to a lot of personal experiences. For example, people usually tie the whole experience with Somalia in a personal way because we have had a lot of social interactions with Somalis. That's why, to some extent, if something bad happens in Somalia, people don't actually look at what's happening in Somalia and be like, I mean, historically, we have been a country that has primed for the safety and also the success of other countries. So of course you'd expect that in our traditions that we will always like try to help these other countries going through a lot of problems. But if people start seeing that there's a war in Somalia, they do not care that there's a war in Somalia. Even if it has out, watch up and now. It's the same reason why Kenyans are very reluctant getting into this whole aspect of Congo or Ethiopia or even what's happening in Palestine because we don't have any personal connection to them. You get? Like, people don't have any personal connection to these places that are going through this entire situation. So, like, seeing Rigiji talking about this entire system, especially now that he has been gaining a lot of attention because of the secrets that he's spilling about the country, people will start caring about this. Some people might care, some people might not care. But personally, this has just been the status quo of Kenya for a very long period of time. Because look at the 1970s when Idi Amin overthrew Milton Obote. Where do you think a lot of people, a lot of high-ranking generals and high-ranking officials in the Ugandan government during Milton Obote's period of time, after they were expelled by Idi Amin, they actually seeked refuge in Kenya and in Tanzania. And in Kenya's case, it was actually worse because to some extent we actually denied hosting these people, even though the Uganda government knew that we were hosting these people. And then later on, we ended up hosting the IDF, the Israeli military, when they came to conduct a raid in Uganda and to save their own Israeli people, right? So, like, of course, Idi Amin had a lot of prejudice towards us, and also at some points in time, he threatened invading us because of the whole aspect of the Kenya-Ugandan border, saying that there were multiple tribes that were existing both in Uganda and Kenya. So initially, there was during independence of both countries, there was actually talks to actually unite them under one banner, under one country. But of course, no country wanted to cede their land that they had actually gotten from independence. So everybody decided to stay with the status quo, and it later on brought tensions with Idi Amin because he wanted to reunite these broken tribes within the Kenya-Ugandan border, right? So there's that with Idi Amin. We hosted the officials that Milton Obote and his friends. Although Milton Obote, I think he was hosted by Tanzania, and then Tanzania eventually went into a war with Uganda. At some point in time, during the Cold War period, we hosted the United States in their attacks and logistics against both Ethiopia and Somalia, because these were two major countries that were actually on the side of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And then later on, when Somalia decided to invade Ethiopia and the Soviet Union actually ditched Somalia and went to support Ethiopia, Kenya was actually very instrumental in making Somalia turn to the United States. And that's why the Somalia has actually been looking for a lot of ties with both the United States and also predominantly Kenya. Although the tensions with Kenya, between Kenya and Somalia, is starting to get a bit messed up because of, well, the Jubaland situation. And mind you, Kenya also brought itself into that entire aspect. So there is also that. And Kenya being involved in a lot of these things is just part of the status quo. It's just that people never actually talk a lot about this. Like us hosting multiple militias, at some point in time during the reign of Siad Barre, we actually hosted so many militias that were existing in Ethiopia, to the point that one of them actually still exists today. The Oromo Liberation Front, I think, they still exist to date. We have supported the RSF, surprisingly. Okay, it's not actually surprising, it's actually part of Kenya's status quo, except the person who initiated those kinds of motives, the ideologies of the passion of the leadership of the country is the one that brought us all the way to Siad Barre, not to Siad Barre, to the RSF. So Kenya getting in ties with the RSF is not shocked. Kenya having a lot of ties to the independence of South Sudan, not actually even shocked to that extent. Kenya having some ties to what's happening in DRC, and also trying to paint its picture by actually saying that it's going to lead a peacekeeping mission towards DRC. Like Kenya, we have had a history of interfering in a lot of other people's situations, especially the leadership position. They interfere so much in a lot of international situations. We host a lot of rebels, we host a lot of legitimate governments, we also help in stabilizing people's countries out there in the far, like right now what you're doing, what we have been predominantly doing for a very long period of time in Somalia, and what you're currently doing in Haiti. People don't actually talk about Haiti that much, you get. So there's that. But the funny thing is, the people of the country just don't want to be involved in this. People in this country just want to be involved in the things that involve them. You get. That's why they have such level of prejudices towards other countries, especially if the Kenyan government now starts delving deep into other countries' situations. That's why people never actually talk about situations that are going on in other countries. That's why we are focusing on a lot of things that happen in our country alone, and we don't actually focus on what's happening in other countries. Okay, I'm not so sure if what I've said makes sense, but what I was trying to say is what Rigiji has said is not actually shocking. And if anything, it has been the status quo of Kenya for a very long period of time. So seeing people being shocked, the fact that we are actually being involved so much in a lot of things happening outside our country, we have always been like that. It's just that now we are starting to see the picture. People are now starting to look past the propaganda being spread by the government, and they're actually looking at what the Kenyan government has been doing for a very long period of time. And this is one of the parts of decolonizing our minds, because we have to know like the true history of our country. Not the history that we are being told at Jomo Kenyatta was the only legitimate freedom fight in our country, but the history that actually happened. Like, for example, Kenya's foreign policy, and how as much as people hate that we are always connected to some other either illegitimate governments or legitimate governments, the fact that it has been part of our history and that we have done it more than once, heck, we are still doing it, and people just were okay with it somehow. Also, I think one of the reasons as to why people are caring a lot about this, whatever's happening right now with the Jubaland forces, is the fact that it's affecting us as Kenyans. Let's leave alone the people who see Mandela as not part of Kenya. Yes, there are people in Kenya who view Kenya as, who view Mandela as not part of Kenya. Let's just leave them alone. People who view Mandela as part of Kenya, now they're starting to care about this because it's actually affecting Kenya. It actually might end up affecting Kenyans in the long run, and it might be a very big issue. But if Westgate happened and people still don't understand what is actually happening between the Al-Shabaab and Somali, if Westgate happened, yet people can't tell the difference between the Al-Shabaab and the Somali, people don't even care to look at the history in what has happened in Somalia. How did Somalia get to that point? And yet it affected us so much to the point that we literally had a terrorist attack that is considered one of the top worst terrorist attacks in the world's history. If we literally went through that, yet people still couldn't look past this entire aspect of learning about the history of that area and knowing what actually happened there. Kama watu walifika to that point and we had a literal terrorist attack, do you think what's happening right now with the Jubaland forces in Mandera will change people's perspective? I really doubt it. I really doubt it, honestly speaking.